Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, as we learn from St. Augustine, Doctor of the Church, while we read his book, Confessions. Welcome, Catholic pilgrims. Today we are getting a longer reading, but it's one where we really start to see how St. Augustine loses himself on the path of the world. We will be reading from Book 2, Chapter 3, so please open to page 45. In the same year, my studies were interrupted. I had already begun to go to the nearby town of Madura to study literature and the art of public speaking, but I was brought back home while my father, a modest citizen of Thagaste, whose determination was greater than his means, saved up the money to send me farther afield to Carthage. I need not tell all this to you, my God, but in your presence I tell it to my own kind, to those other men, however few, who may perhaps pick up this book. And I tell it so that I and all who read my words may realize the depths from which we are to cry to you. Your ears will surely listen to the cry of a penitent heart which lives the life of faith. No one had anything but praise for my father, who, despite his slender resources, was ready to provide his son with all that was needed to enable him to travel so far for the purpose of study. Many of our townsmen, far richer than my father, went to no such trouble for their children's sake. Yet the same father of mine took no trouble at all to see how I was growing in your sight, or whether I was chaste or not. He cared only that I should have a fertile tongue, leaving my heart to bear none of your fruits, my God, though you are the only master, true and good, of its husbandry. In the meanwhile, during my 16th year, the narrow means of my family obliged me to leave school and live idly at home with my parents. The brambles of lust grew high above my head, and there was no one to root them out, certainly not my father. One day at the public baths, he saw the signs of active virility coming to life in me, and this was enough to make him relish the thought of having grandchildren. He was happy to tell my mother about it, for his happiness was due to the intoxication which causes the world to forget you, its creator, and to love the things you have created instead of loving you, because the world is drunk with the invisible wine of its own perverted, earthbound will. But in my mother's heart, you had already begun to build your temple and laid the foundations of your holy dwelling, while my father was still a catechumen, and a new one at that. So, in her piety, she became alarmed and apprehensive, and although I had not yet been baptized, she began to dread that I might follow in the crooked path of those who do not keep their eyes on you, but turn their backs instead. How presumptuous it was of me to say that you were silent, my God, when I drifted farther and farther away from you. Can it be true that you said nothing to me at that time? Surely the words which rang in my ears, spoken by your faithful servant, my mother, could have come from none but you. Yet none of them sank into my heart to make me do as you said. I well remember what her wishes were, and how she most earnestly warned me not to commit fornication, and above all not to seduce any man's wife. It all seemed womanish advice to me, and I should have blushed to accept it. Yet the words were yours, though I did not know it. I thought that you were silent and that she was speaking, but all the while you were speaking to me through her. And when I disregarded her, your handmaid, I was disregarding you, though I was both her son and your servant. But I did this unawares and continued headlong on my way. I was so blind to the truth that among my companions I was ashamed to be less dissolute than they were, for I heard them bragging of their depravity, and the greater the sin, the more they gloried in it, so that I took pleasure in the same vices not only for the enjoyment of what I did, but also for the applause I won. Nothing deserves to be despised more than vice. Yet I gave in more and more to vice simply in order not to be despised. If I had not sinned enough to rival other sinners, I used to pretend that I had done things I had not done at all because I was afraid that innocence would be taken for cowardice and chastity for weakness. These were the companions with whom I walked the streets of Babylon. I wallowed in its mire as if it were made of spices and precious ointments. And to fix me all the faster in the very depths of sin, the unseen enemy trod me underfoot and enticed me to himself, because I was an easy prey for his seductions. For even my mother, who by now had escaped from the center of Babylon, though she still loitered in its outskirts, did not act upon what she had heard about me from her husband with the same earnestness as she had advised me about chastity. She saw that I was already infected with a disease that would become dangerous later on, but if the growth of my passions could not be cut back to the quick, she did not think it right to restrict them to the bounds of married love. This was because she was afraid that the bonds of marriage might be a hindrance to my hopes for the future. Not, of course, the hope of the life to come, which she reposed in you, but my hopes of success in my studies. Both my parents were unduly eager for me to learn. My father because he gave next to no thought to you and only shallow thought to me, and my mother because she thought that the usual course of study would certainly not hinder me, but would even help me in my approach to you. To the best of my memory, this is how I construe the characters of my parents. Furthermore, I was given a free rein to amuse myself beyond the strict limits of discipline, so that I lost myself in many kinds of evil ways, in all of which a pall of darkness hung between me and the bright light of your truth, my God. What malice proceeded from my pampered heart? Every so often I will meet someone or hear about someone that takes this attitude with their children. I don't want to pressure them into religion. It's got to be a choice they make, and so I'll leave it up to them to find their path. This is not a noble way of thinking in the slightest. There are literally hundreds of things parents make their kids do because we know that it is good for them. First, you have to introduce them to said thing, and then you have to teach them about it, and then you guide them along the path, instruct as you go, and then eventually you send them off into the world, and they will ultimately have to make the decisions for themselves. For example, we would never say, "Oh, I don't want to pressure my kids to brush their teeth. I'll let them feel it out and see what they want to do." Any good, loving parent would never do this. We don't leave teeth brushing up for an option because we know that healthy teeth are important. And parents that don't teach their kids to brush their teeth set them up for a lifetime of dental issues and health problems. On the intellectual side, we never say, "I don't want to pressure my kids into learning. I'll let them decide whether they want to or not." Any good loving parent would never do this. We don't leave learning up for an option because we know that learning to read, write, and do math and other things are important for their minds and for functioning well in this world. And parents who just let their kids decide if they want to learn or not are seen as neglectful and abusive, and rightfully so. But when it comes to our kids' souls, too many people who do believe in Jesus just want their kids to figure it out. Our souls are the most important part of us, and that is the part that many neglect. St. Augustine shows us that his dad cared about him being a good student and a good speaker, and there's nothing wrong with that. But even when his father knew that he was fornicating and harming his well-being, he said nothing. Quote, "Yet the same Father of mine took no trouble at all to see how I was growing in your sight, or whether I was chaste or not." Unquote. With all things, there will come a point where kids have to make the choice to embrace what we've taught them or not, even with religion. So even if we teach them virtues, faith in God, about Christianity and the Gospels, they will still have to make a choice to accept it. So if the fear is that they will be stripped of choice, that's just not true. It is good to care about our children's emotional, physical, intellectual, and mental well-being, but we cannot neglect their spiritual well-being. They may choose to ignore us or disregard us, but we have to try nonetheless. St. Augustine at 16 thought his mother's advice was womanish nonsense, but later he comes to see that her words were as if God was speaking to him. She was planting the seed whether he listened right then or not. And that is what we are all called to do. That'll do it for today, Catholic Pilgrims. I will see you back here soon, and until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.